Okay, let's get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Medina with Investors Advantage. For those of you who don't know us, we're a financial planning money management firm located in Westlake Village. We've been in Westlake Village for over 20 years. The company was founded in 1979 by President John Grace, who's gonna come on the screen now.
Thanks, Daniel. And I think as my main math man, we've been here since 1987, so I think that's over 30, and I've only been doing this since 1997, which is hard for me to even believe that's over 40. Time flies whether or not you're having fun. Please feel free to visit our website, WhyBePoor, WhyBePoor. A lot of information stored there. A lot of our interviews are stored there. In fact, I was on an interview with Yahoo Finance just earlier this week. And lo and behold, I happened to be looking at something else at Yahoo Finance, and my interview ended up being at the top of the stack. That's never happened before, so I'm kind of excited. And we were talking about what kind of recovery there might be, and we can get into that. Please ask that question, what kind of recovery there might be, because our answer is vastly different than what you're hearing in the news. But let's just go over what's happening today and how we see things and what we think it's appropriate to focus on. And then we have on deck Patrick Spencer. We just recognized, I've known him for, 5 years now. I met him at the Reserve, where he worked as a trainer for, very, very elderly people. And now I met him at Equinox earlier this year, or last year, and he became my personal trainer. And he's going to help us recognize how we can, stay home and stay fit. I mean, that's a great question. And avoid eating all the bonbons we could possibly consume, because, of course, that would also be hazardous to our health. But I digress. So stocks fell today as traders grappled with downbeat remarks from Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell amid jitters about reopening the economy. Today, the Dow dropped about 450 points, or about 2%. The S&P and NASDAQ followed at about a loss of 1.75%. Now, this gets a little interesting, because I think this may be where we are, and it'll be interesting to see if this is where we stay in a decline mode. For the year, we're at losses, but we'll see how this may or may not pick up steam. Listen to what Federal Chair Powell said before the Peterson Institute for International Studies today. He said that more needs to be done to sustain the economy. However, the economy should see a substantial recovery once the coronavirus is under control. Now, remember, they kind of speak in a different language, but they also want to all keep their jobs, our politicians and the government employees. He also said, this again is Chairman Powell, that the path ahead is both highly uncertain and subject to significant downside risks. Now he's showing his hands. And they don't do that a lot. And I'm saying listen very closely, because I think he has just given you the roadmap in terms of where are we going from here. Significant downside risks is what this economy is subject to. So make no mistake about it, with COVID-19, in my opinion, it is a disaster of epic proportions. In our question and answer period, please ask, what are our 3 essential steps to avoid a pandemic crash as far as your life savings is concerned? Because we want to, be healthy and stay as wealthy as we possibly can in this thing called life. So we're going to talk a little different subject, because one of the other things that people pay attention to is residential real estate. And for what it's worth, we've been paying for independent research since 1999 to the tune of about $10,000 a year in some years. And we've continued to pay for that independent research. The value I have found is that most of our peers, the information we have is from the hierarchy. The hierarchy, of course, are the companies that represent the products they build, whether it's insurance, whether it's exchange traded funds, whether it's mutual funds. And, there's never a bad time to buy a mutual fund. And about the only message, unfortunately, I think we've been successful at conveying to investors is buy and hold no matter what. But what about real estate? Because for most of us, particularly most of us in the world, we have a disproportionate percentage of our assets tied up in real estate. And the only thing we've seen are gains. So we think we've seen everything over the last 40 years. And I really want you to follow along. So we're going to make it as simple as we possibly can. But I do like those questions. So we'll put it on the whiteboard and just kind of step through this thing, the fate of real estate. So where are we going from here? I can't see the future either. But what we can do is put on our high beams and plug in our GPS and see what might be around the corner, because of course we'd like to know some idea of what's around the corner before we get to whatever that object looks like it may be that we couldn't see in the middle of the night, in the dark and without our GPS program. So many of us believe that COVID-19 has just upset the real estate market. And in many ways it has. But I think there are larger patterns that most of us don't study, including the professionals in the real estate industry. A good friend of mine runs a very large real estate office in Malibu. And he says, John, I've been in the business for 40 years. I've seen everything. I said, no, actually, you've seen the best of times, because you've only seen the experience of 76 million people coming into this equation called the United States of America. All right, we'll talk more about that because we want you to see the patterns that most professionals do not see. Most professionals do not pay for independent research. Most professionals, none of us like math for the most part, and none of us really want to study history. But some of us are willing to do that, and that's what we're really trying to do here, is see what can we learn from the past as opposed to just blindly repeating the past, because it may very well, or something very similar to may very well play out in our immediate future. But if we don't see it, sometimes we go crashing right into it. So when it comes to real estate, let's go over the laws in terms of what we've been taught. What have we been told that drives residential real estate prices? I think number one would be location. Number two is inventory. And right now that's all the noise that we're hearing. There's no inventory, so prices keep going up. I'm going to submit to you that's just temporary. And of course, interest rates. Now let's just pause right here with interest rates, because if you are a boomer, you remember the early 80s, and there was an absolute rite of passage in the early 80s. Boomers were educated, getting some decent jobs, making some decent money, and whatever party you went to, the conversation at every party was, what did you buy? What do you have in escrow? Oh, you closed escrow, and you already made money on this deal. This is a really good thing. Now remember, this is when interest rates on first trust deeds were 16%. So that might put a little crack in the cover from the standpoint of saying interest rates drive real estate. Interest rates had nothing to do with real estate prices when all of this demand is coming out of the woodwork to buy all of these prices. So location, number one, inventory, number two, and interest rates. Now, to the other side of the equation, excuse me, if you told any baby boomer, early 80s, in any time in the 80s when we were 11 to 16% interest rates to get a house with a 30-year loan. If you said, look, there's going to be 3% money in your future for 30-year loans, every boomer would have thrown you out their house because you're obviously an idiot. We got to where are we right now? 2.5, 2.6. Did anyone see that one coming? No. But let's just recognize when we were all forming families, we were literally standing in line to buy a house. We did 3 times. And now that you see 2.5%, 3% money, who's standing in line anywhere in the country to buy a house? Not like it used to be. All right. So I'm going to say those are the things that we've been taught. But the primary driver is something entirely different. So if these aren't the 3 things that we should focus on, I'm submitting that, yes, they are important, but they are not the primary driver. Here's the 1-2 punch that you probably have not heard, so I'm glad you're here. What is it that is the primary driver of real estate? It's the home buying and selling behavior of consumers based on age. We need to look at the patterns of when we buy and when we sell relative to age, because just as we discussed, with all of this demand, the 16% interest rates on a first trust deed for 30 years did not impede all of these people literally standing in line to buy houses. And when we see 3% money or better, notice that really wasn't much of a boost to cause people to get off the couch and go put out a loan, okay? So the primary driver would be looking at what we buy and when we sell, and we can see that from the standpoint of ages, just to make it very simple. And all of this comes from the U.S. Census Bureau and Debt Research. That's one of the companies we paid a fair amount of money to kind of get a sense what the big picture is, because it's so easy to get lost in the weeds. So let's see. Most Americans bought their first house at the age of 31. I think I was 24. And it was only because I had a godmother who was a realtor, and she kept talking about real estate, and save your money, save your money. So I bought a triplex. That was my first rental, and by the way, my last rental. But 31 is the age historically that, go back and look to see how old were you when you bought your first house. Average age is 31. You thought you were doing something unique. You were doing what everybody else was doing, part of the herd. That's number one. Number two, when did we historically buy our biggest house in America? Most consumers, the age is 41. Now that gets a little interesting too, because from 1980 to 1999, 40% of all the homes purchased in the country were on lot sizes of 1/2 acre to 10 acres in size. And, I thought I was doing something special. I had to have a 5,000 square foot house, 2.5 acres, 6-car garage, 6 bedrooms, 7 baths. It just seemed like something I needed to do and to really be different. And guess what I was doing? What every other boomer was doing exactly during the exact same 20-year period from 1980 to 1999 or about 2000. Fascinating, isn't it? We thought we were so unique. So now let's put on those headlights, the high beams, and our GPS. The question is, where do we go from here? And I'm going to say to you from the same source, U.S. Census Bureau and Dent Research, it's fascinating because the age at which most Americans sell their homes is 78. Why is that age important? Boomers born 1946, 1964, it makes them, 55 to 74 this year? So if this pattern holds, and I don't know why it wouldn't, then we may see the next 20 years or so massive selling. That's what I think will happen. And again, some people say, well, that just might not happen. I'm going to say, well, why wouldn't it happen? But let's also understand Mother Nature and Father Time hold the trump cards, that's with a small t. And in America, we're all over and out typically in the mid 80s. So one way or the other, we're coming out of that house, either because we sold it or our heirs sold it. We're coming out of the house. It's going to get sold. All right. So it's 78 that most of us sell. So let me say it to you another way. When was the last time you experienced 24% of the population just simply disappearing? You haven't. You've only seen one occasion in history, in the world, and in the country where 76 million people came into the equation. Legal, illegal, legitimate, illegitimate, 76 million. That suggests to me that prices have to go up just to respond to all of that demand coming out of the woodwork. Well, if it's the case that this number of people help prices go higher, is it reasonable that prices might go lower as 76 million people take 20 years or so to go to heaven? I think that's reasonable. In fact, I would submit that, if the number of people that would be demand goes to heaven and the supply, 120, 130 years worth of residential inventory remains on what was hopefully the still green earth, stays here, prices got to go south, maybe to hell. And please recognize that might include rent prices too. And when I'm really pressed to say, how bad do I think it would get? Yes, it will be by neighborhood. But in the work that we've done, it would appear, for example, that Cleveland might see a decline of as bad as 13%. The East Coast, it might be more like 50%. And the West Coast, it might be more like 60%. 60%, 50% from here. So it would be, we all understand buy low, sell high, but most of us don't recognize that you sell at the peak and take your profits and figure out what you want to do with them. One of the questions that I'm asked is, and the answer is always going to depend on who the audience is. If it's a boomer with, a big house that a lot of equity is in it that they may need, it might be time to release that equity. Certainly if it's 2 or 3 houses that many clients own, it may be time to get that money while you can at these prices. Then you can watch the movie. And whatever the prices do, you don't care because you're not invested. If you're a millennial, it may be that you want to keep your powder dry. In other words, don't be anxious to buy anything because you might see the prices decline, and certainly you want to have your money ready to take advantage of those prices that have declined. So, as I say, first, the 20% of the population is going to go to heaven. And then second, You know, home prices and rental prices probably will have to decline just because we've never been in a position where 76 million, we'll get this word, 24% of the population with a THE. And then, you know, we've never been in a situation where we've seen 24% of the population just be gone. So that's what I think is going to happen as far as residential real estate is concerned. And we're happy to answer questions about this. And by the way, one of the questions might be, where do we see opportunities when it comes to real estate? But in the meantime, seeing as we're stuck at home, we're not stuck on the couch, and it doesn't mean we have to suck up all the bonbons we can possibly buy and consume, along with all the toilet paper and water we can buy and consume, right? So the question becomes, how might we be able to stay home and stay fit? And we have my good friend, Patrick Spencer, a local young guy, graduate of Thousand Oaks High School, attended Cal Lutheran University, as I recall. He is a certified personal trainer that got his certificate in 2012, done a lot of work with a lot of organizations, and I say was at the Reserve. And part of the thing that I remember talking with Patrick about is, you know, what happens with a lot of guys is we're trying to read the paper, but we fall out of the chair and break our hips. So what we want Patrick to help us do is give us some talents, Coach, where, you know, we can bounce and don't break. Patrick, take it from there, please.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate you having me on today. This is a subject that I am really excited about. Obviously, I've chosen to take this path through my career, and my ability to have that interaction with people like yourself and my regular clients has been impacted by not being able to be in proximity with each other, especially in a gym environment. So this is a cool opportunity to continue the influence that I like to give to people. A little bit of background. I have been a personal trainer for coming up on 10 years. My specialties are in strength conditioning. I first started with an internship here in Westlake Village at a facility called Sports West Performance, where I trained athletes from the ages of 8 all the way through to college. Meanwhile, same time, I was also training seniors at the Reserve here in Thousand Oaks, the average age of 87, with my oldest client being 103 years old. I hold a performance enhancement specialization, a fitness nutrition specialization, and a behavior change specialization. And that last one, the behavior change, is what I think I can benefit people most here today. Unfortunately, in the time we have, I can't teach everybody how to work out perfectly. But I can give you a little bit of a framework on how you can start to develop some habits that are going to benefit you in a multitude of ways while you're stuck at home. And for many of us, probably have a bit more free time. So May is actually Mental Health Awareness Month. And that's a couple of the things that I want to talk about. John sent me an email a while ago when all this got started, talking about the top concerns that have been reported to mental health professionals since the beginning of our lockdown and pandemic. And some of those, I'm sure everybody else has been experiencing, like a feeling of burnout, fear, and uncertainty regarding family, financial security, and what the future is going to look like post-pandemic. People are having conflicts of faith, feelings of worldwide anxiety and grieving of our old lives and normalcy, and guilt for finding pleasure during these times. And most of the people that have tuned in are taking some agency to combat these things, especially the financial security. What I want to talk to you about is how you can be better prepared, not only to effectively fight COVID-19 and resist infection, but also to improve your general health outside of the pandemic situation through healthy eating and regular exercise habits. So if we hop on over to the first slide, we'll see that disruption of regular schedule is one of the things that causes a lot of mental health problems. Obviously, if you are someone who is going to the gym exclusively to work out, that has stopped. And unless you knew what you were doing and you were completely comfortable programming your exercise for yourself, you probably haven't been doing much exercise at home. I would like to help everybody develop a habit that is independent of the space that you had assigned to physical fitness in the past, and start making it something that can benefit you no matter where you are. So obviously with isolation comes quite a few complications. You might have a workout partner that you don't have access to anymore. So So self-accountability, self-motivation, and self-discipline are all going to be key. Those mental health problems that I mentioned, pretty close to 50% of adults in the US have self-reported that there has been some significant cause of stress or a new onset of some mental health condition. So this is very clearly something that needs to be addressed. If we hop over to the next slide, we can take another closer look at that. One of the things that is most important in terms of reducing those feelings of stress and treating your own health mentally and physically is a feeling of agency and being productive. One of the things that can't be removed from you, no matter which government agency is telling you not to leave your house and to stay 6 feet away from you, is the ability to move. Even if we were told that we weren't allowed to go out on walks, there's plenty that you can do with just your body weight in your home and with your diet to benefit your health. Personally, what I've struggled with a lot during this whole experience is my lack of ability to influence the situation as a whole. So turning that gaze inward and taking a look at what you can do for your individual situation is huge for making it feel like you've still got a little bit of that power. Exercise is, like I mentioned, one of the best ways to do that. It's a small but noticeable scale. It can be affected day to day. And if you're doing it right, it'll also help us with the specific conditions of the pandemic. If I can leave everybody with one takeaway today, it's that everybody can have a good relationship with exercise, but it doesn't have to be going to the gym and lifting weights. It definitely doesn't have to be going out and running miles and being a distance runner. It doesn't have to be getting on a bike or a Peloton or whatever the latest fad may be. It might take some exploring, but you can find something that you get some enjoyment out of. And that's one of the things that's going to really benefit you in developing a habit that's going to last you long term. I always say, and I'm sure John has heard me say this multiple times, results come from consistency, not intensity. If you do something at 30% intensity, but you do it every day for the rest of your life, it's going to do far more good for you in terms of your health, your physical fitness, and that mental health than if you 2 days a week go out weekend warrior 80%, 90% intensity, and then you're limping around for the rest of the day. That's no way to build a good view on exercise. So what we have to do is find something that's rewarding intrinsically to you. I'd also like to emphasize starting sooner is better than starting later. Motion is lotion, rest is rust. The longer you wait, the harder it's going to be to get going. But every time you take that little step forward, you knock off some of that rust and you build momentum. And that's what we're going to look at starting today. So if we could pop over to the next slide, please. So most people, I think, have heard of the runner's high. The runner's high is a rush of endorphins that endurance athletes get when they push themselves past a specific point of discomfort, where they essentially get a neurological reward so that their body can continue to perform at a high level and not suffer in performance. Luckily, like I said, you don't have to run to get that rush, but really what we're looking at is the runner's high is more of a metaphor. May not always be an endorphin rush, but it can be something that is very beneficial and can keep you going on what can be difficult. Exercise is inherently difficult if it's beneficial. Your body doesn't change if you do something inside of its comfort zone. So it's just like a financial investment where you might sacrifice a little bit of immediate liquidity and cash for a greater return down the road. Your runner's high can come in a multitude of different ways. The one that I think is really specific to our current situation is security and safety. A 2019 study by researchers at the University of Bath showed that a single bout of appropriately intense exercise can have an acute effect on your immune system, sending white blood cells and antibodies specifically to your airways, lungs, and stomach, which coincidentally are the places that the coronavirus takes hold. So if there's a time for you to start becoming active if you aren't already, this is a huge benefit. There's no point in allowing this boost to your immunity that you can affect every single day and reap more benefits. You shouldn't leave that on the table. Obesity is another risk factor for COVID-19 mortality. Obviously, that is something that takes a bit longer to affect if you are someone that has some extra mass that you're looking to get rid of. That consistency is going to be key. You can't go out, exercise like crazy for a day, and drop 6 pounds. And for a lot of people, I think we all know the averages. You've seen what the percentages of Americans are that are overweight. I think it's close to 36%, and obesity is not far behind that. Setting up habits that are going to change that over time is going to be the best way for you to combat that. But if you haven't been involved in fitness regularly, you may not know where to begin. So the same reason that candy bars, that I think we can all agree are bad for you, are placed at the cash register in the store, is going to lead us to what we'll try to establish when it comes to developing good habits in terms of diet, exercise, and some self-care and stress relief in terms of mental health. The easier it is to do something, the more you're going to do it. It's not about grinding every day and doing the hard work. You know, we like to talk about the work ethic, but when it comes down to it, when you're doing something that's inherently uncomfortable and you don't have the habit for it, don't self-sacrifice. Try to make it easy. Try to make it fun. So when we're trying to establish that new habit, goal setting can be very important. When you're setting your goal, try to do something that is moderate or short-term first. Don't set yourself an insanely ambitious goal and expect to reach it in a month or 2 or 3. When it comes down to it, your physical health is a lifelong investment. What I want to do is help to foster a self-sufficiency where you don't need to hire a personal trainer for the duration of your life to keep you fit. So let's break those habit forming steps down. Any habit can be broken down into C's and R's. We'll go into that. The C's are the first half. Those are your cues and your cravings. The R's are responses and rewards. So a cue is any information that triggers a behavior, like checking out at the grocery store and seeing that Snickers bar that you like so much, right? That cue triggers a craving. But stuff like the candy bar and turning on the TV, those aren't cues. Well, the cue sets up your craving in that seeing the candy bar, the cue is not, I want to buy that candy bar because it feels good. You want to eat the candy bar because you get a huge dopamine rush. It's tons of sugar. It tastes way better than most of the food that you're supposed to eat. You don't want to turn on the TV. You want to be entertained. Those wants are your cravings, the motivation behind the habits that you have. And without these cravings, there would never be any action. Smokers don't crave the cue of their cigarette. They crave the relief that smoking one provides. So the R's are where it starts to get really interesting. The R's are response and reward. The response is how you act in the face of your cravings, how you address it. It sounds simple, but a habit can't be formed if you aren't capable of your response to your crew and your craving. So it has to be within reach. Say I take someone who's 5'5" and has never been athletic, and they have a goal to dunk a basketball. Well, for most people, that's way outside of reach. And setting yourself an ambitious goal with a limited response is also going to delay your reward. 5'5" trying to dunk a basketball isn't going to be touching the rim anytime soon. He's not going to get that tactile reward of even being close for quite a long time. So it's a better idea to set a goal that you can start to see some significant progress in 3 weeks or a month or 2 months. Something that is relatively short term is always going to be easier to stick with, especially when people are already experiencing burnout. The reward is what you gain from your response. This is your runner's high. A promotion brings a raise and more monetary success. Getting in shape, might improve your physical fitness, make you more confident, expand your dating pool. Those are the rewards to the enacted response. So by understanding the components of the habits, you can form an easy guideline to create a habit or break a bad one. What I want everybody to do is to think about a goal, maybe one that has eluded you for some time, or it can just be a hypothetical if you're not really ready to set one yourself. And I want you to break it down. You want to make your cue obvious. You want to make your craving as attractive as possible. You want to make the response easy to enact, and the reward needs to be satisfying. So if your goal is to run every morning or get out and walk every morning, make your cue obvious. You leave your running shoes and whatever outfit you're going to exercise in ready and right next to your bed. So as soon as you swing your feet down and you go feet to floor, everything you need is right there. The craving has to be attractive. So if that's your favorite breakfast that you make yourself afterwards, it can be associated with the cue, or it can be associated with something that you're using as positive reinforcement. The response should be easy. Day 1, don't go out and walk a half marathon, because that's going to make the reward very far from satisfying. Nobody likes feeling sore for 8 days on end. That doesn't help you to set a habit. So once you've set up those C's and R's that are obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying, you've got the framework for the 28 steps. The 28 steps are 28 consecutive actions. For 28 days, or close to it in the realm of exercise, you continue running through step 1, 2, 3, and 4, both C's, both R's, for 28 consecutive days. So if it's walk every day, right, that's an exercise that you're not going to need to recover from for days on end. It's not like strength training or going out and training for a half marathon. You can walk every day. If you walk every morning, first thing, for 28 consecutive days, psychologically, many studies have shown that it becomes an autonomous habit. It will be something you expect to do without thinking about it. And you will get the same rewards every single time you take that action, but you're not going to have to fight yourself and convince yourself that those are steps that you need to take. And this framework can be applied to breaking habits as well. You just invert everything. You can make your cue as hard to find as possible. You make your craving unattractive, the response as difficult as possible, and try to make the reward unsatisfying. So if it's dropping 10 pounds is your goal, and you're going to do that through diet, which is the most guaranteed way, your cues should all be very hard to do. If you have foods that you can't control yourself around, you have to stop buying them, because if they're sitting there in your pantry for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, you might have the willpower of a god, but eventually you're craving. You're gonna crack. It's all about setting yourself up for success in the most sustainable way possible. And if anybody happens to have any questions as to how you can make your cues obvious, your cravings attractive, your responses easy, or your rewards satisfying, or how to enact those 28 steps responsibly and realistically, I'd love to open up for some questions and see if we can't run through a bit of a framework for your specific goals now.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. I got a few questions that came in for you. The first one is, do you train virtually?
I do. So it's one of the things that I've been doing with my clients at Equinox, as well as independently, have been running Zoom sessions. So far, I haven't gotten John in on one, but I'm hoping that we can.
There's still time.
Put you on the spot, John.
I know he misses our 6:30 appointments bright and early while we're both still rubbing the sleep out of our eyes. But yes, I do train virtually. And for everyone who has tuned in today, I'd love to offer everybody at least a conversation as far as what a program might look like, and some quick advice specific to goal one-on-one if they're not comfortable sharing in a group setting, is something I'd be more than willing to do.
Excellent. We'll be sending out Patrick's contact information after the webinar to everyone that's on.
And that was news to me, Patrick. You didn't invite me, so I didn't show up. There we have it.
Well, consider yourself invited.
All right. I might show up now.
Okay.
Second question, Patrick. How do you find motivation nowadays?
So motivation is a really tricky one. Unfortunately, motivation is really fickle, but that kind of comes down to the response and the reward. If your reward is satisfying enough and you've set your goals accordingly, every time you take those 4 steps through your C's and your R's, you'll get a little bit of reward, and that in and of itself can maintain motivation. But for myself, I mean, I was an athlete since I was 8 years old. You know, I've been pretty competitive in sports from the time I entered high school all the way through until a couple of years ago. And I still train pretty close to 6 days a week in strength training and like an athletic type movement sense. And in the long term, what's going to benefit you the most is not necessarily relying on that motivation, but understanding that the consistency and the discipline that you apply to your training is going to take you much farther. And you'll go through spurts where you have tons of motivation and you never have to think about stepping inside the gym or going out and hitting your run or getting on the Peloton. But there are going to be days where it's difficult and you don't want to. And those are the days that I find the reward is the most satisfying.
Yeah, let me just jump in here, please, because I would say one of my past trainers used to have a great line, I thought, and she would say, take your mind out of the equation. So a question like that typically is the monkey mind talking, and the monkey mind is keeping you from taking that first step. What I know to be true is the monkey mind you can't let them win, okay? The monkey mind's not going to stop. But put a leash on that monkey mind and say, you know what? Here's what I do know. Once I'm done, I'm going to feel good about this. So let me work through all those processes as I'm going through the first set of exercises, and let me promise I'm going to do it today or whatever my schedule is. And by the time, each time you're finished, you're like, well, I sure didn't want to do this, but I'm sure glad I did.
Right. And so, and to that note, outside of motivation and discipline, there are a series of steps that you can take to make sure that it's not just a fail in motivation that keeps you from pursuing your goal or trying to establish a habit. For me personally, I go into my calendar and I schedule every single workout that I've got for the month, and I can't cancel, but I can reschedule. And I treat every single one like it's a professional appointment. I don't blow off professional appointments. I'm not going to blow off taking care of my own physical health. It's just as, if not more important. Another way you can do that is you find someone who you can work out with so that if you don't show up and your friend does, you get an earful. I know for a lot of my clients, they're good at exercising. They've been doing it for years and they've had a multitude of trainers, but having that appointment is their sense of accountability.
Excellent. Good points. Next question for you, Patrick. What do you typically charge?
So my rates vary, but my virtual rates fall at about $70 a session. When I am in the gym at Equinox, my rates fall anywhere between $100 and $120 an hour.
Excellent. Good discount for these COVID times.
When you say $70 a session, what's the time frame?
So every session is, depending on the goal, 50 to 60 minutes.
Okay.
John, this is a question for you. You mentioned rents possibly going down. Have rents ever gone down before?
Yes, they have. Probably not in your lifetime. And see, that's the piece of the puzzle that people have trouble with. As I say, we don't look at history. We only look at our history. And our history occurred as 76 million people came into the equation and didn't go anywhere. So you've only seen rents go up, which makes you know they can never go down. But that's not true. We had a Great Depression. A depression is interesting, mostly from the standpoint the government has no tools to affect your behavior. But if it is a case that you can't or you don't choose to buy anything, the government can't make you do anything about spending your hard-earned money. And by the way, one of the good things that I think is going to come out of COVID-19 is finally Americans are going to put our priorities in order. It's not just spend, baby, spend. And if you don't save for yourself first, who's going to do it for you? I mean, let's recognize, this comes from Dr. Quincy Crosby, economist at Prudential, 54% of 54% of Americans, that's everybody, cannot put our hands on resources outside of 30 days. So as I tell you, we wait till the end of the checkbook to try and save $5. And then in 30 days, we need the $5 and we have zero. So I think we're going to prioritize what we do differently. Save first, spend second, repeat, repeat, repeat. That's the habit that makes sense. And the specific answer to your question is, after Great Depression from 1929 to 1930, when we saw as the stock market dropped 80%, New York real estate prices dropped 70%. Took 40 years for New York real estate prices to get back to even by a couple of accounts that I can find, 40 years. And let's recognize, if you were an adult in the early 1900s, your life expectancy was mid-50s. So that's, by the way, one of the drivers why we do things like this, because studying that whole occasion, the Great Depression, it's like, man, that suggests to me that a whole lot of really good people died with regret because the house didn't come back while they were here. The stocks didn't come back while they were here. They never recovered in their lifetime. I really don't want to be a party to that. So when depressions happen, all prices go down, including the price of everything, whether it's bread or an apartment building, along with the rents. I think salaries dropped. Unemployment was 25%. Salaries, if I'm not mistaken, dropped 40%. In that environment, rent prices will come down. And I mean, let's just look at Japan. This was on 60 Minutes a week ago. What do we know about Japan? Industrious, smart, They go to school. They're very polite. They have a lot of self-pride. And the whole story on this segment was about the number of people in Japan who are suddenly homeless. And they finished with one gentleman where he wouldn't give his name because of their pride. But he says, you know what? I never imagined I would be in a position like this. I now have on me 1,000 yen, which is the equivalent of $9 US, and I don't see another dollar coming. I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness. We have followed Japan in a lot of ways. Could this be an example of what is in our maybe very near future? Stay tuned. Prices do come down on everything.
I saw a couple reports where in 2008 rental prices came down, and along with last month rental prices were coming down. So it's happened recently too.
Yeah, and I think this is just the beginning, because like I say, at the end of the day, if you're trying to get a sense for what drives prices, it's not sales, which is what we've been told. It's people. And we can see a lot of that by looking at the buying and selling behavior of people based on age. And right now we seem to be in the mood, we'll see how long this lasts, of putting profits and stock prices above the lives of ordinary people. I suspect, I actually pray that we get that priority revisited and recognize, well, if you just want to kick the old people to the curb and say, well, they're over and out the hill, they're going away anyway. Let's just recognize if you're trying to get the economy to go again, and you've got people who just died, they're not buying anything, cash or credit. So maybe we want to keep as many as we possibly can, as healthy as we possibly can, so we can survive and thrive. That's how I look at it.
Excellent. Last question before we close it off. What does negative rates mean to us?
That's a really interesting question, because the bond market seems to be forecasting that the Fed's going to go negative and follow the examples of other countries. Publicly, everybody on the Fed says that's not on our agenda. But let me say it another way. Who foresaw oil prices going negative? No one. So while we're saying with our mouths that we won't go negative, I would submit to you that it may be something that we venture into because we think we have no other capacity to try and keep the economy moving. Like I say, when depressions happen, the government has no tools for that. But let's also understand, one of the things I think we have been misled to believe is the politicians and the Fed, central banks around the world, are omnipotent, and they have the capacity to make everything just hum. They have the capacity, we are led to believe, that you can simply create a magnificent thermostat and put it on the wall, and the machine will make the adjustments so that the cooling kicks in when it's needed and the warming kicks in when it's needed, so we're all really fat, dumb, and happy and comfortable as we possibly can. And the truth is, that's not how life works. And that's not how the economy works. Absolutely, the spending for the most part in America, it's 68, 70% of the gross domestic product. They're people, regular, ordinary consumers. So like I say, if they're not here, you can't make them spend. And sometimes this might be a good way to look at it. One of the things that I came away from one of our meetings with the research team is, think of the economy as analogous to weather. There's 4 seasons, and winter can be very harsh, and a lot of things die in the winter, but some things get stronger. And maybe the best news is 2 pieces here. On a per capita basis, more Americans became millionaires than any other time in history during the Great Depression. That ain't all bad news for those who had cash, So we've got to be ready for the unknown, as opposed to just kind of sit and take it and hope for the best and not have any idea how we're going to play the game.
Great answers, guys. On the screen is our next 3 webinars. We'll be doing this for the foreseeable future. And please join us next week where we're talking to Terry Hilliard. And the topic will be, You're Not Alone, 5 successful tips with dealing with aging parents at this most difficult time. I know I'm personally going through this too.
Daniel?
Terry, I don't have her bio in front of me.
Well, she's an attorney, and this is the work that she does. That's why she's speaking, and she has worked with our clients. You know, as you're dealing with family, and you see, or it's us as we're aging, the family, of course, is looking at a whole lot of considerations to what would be perfect for mom and dad or whoever's left, and it's a real conundrum because everybody wants to take those who are interested in the family, take good care of mom and dad, and there's a lot of issues to cover. And she helps professionally folks discover where you can configure things so that more of the state or the local governments might pick up some of the expenses, and what your options are to, you know, try and help that road be as smooth as possible.
Excellent. We'll be on next week. And for those of you who we haven't talked to before, if you weren't prepared for the last 2 months financially, then you're not prepared for the next 20 years. So we're going to be sending out a follow-up email after this with our contact information. And if you haven't been to our website, we have a lot of good material on our website. We post all of our webinars and all of John's interviews. So catch everything that we do. www.ybcore.com.
Sorry, in the piece that you'll be receiving right after we're finished or shortly thereafter, there's a 2-minute video that helps people recognize what a 50% loss might do to their chances of being able to retire successfully and have the same kind of income they need from, let's say, age 70 through age 100. And then the second part of that, step 2, is you can answer the questions for yourself. We think that, you know, the notion of, are you conservative, moderate, or aggressive? They're dumb questions because we have no good answers. So maybe there's a better way to go, and we think there is. And that is for you to spend a minute, maybe 5 minutes, to look at the range of loss versus gains you think you can live with. You can adjust this, but the real issue is, or the opportunity is let's say you can live with an 8% loss, and the market's off 20, and your account's off 7. Now you're like, hey, I don't really care. As long as my returns are less than the market and within my range, I'm good. That's the kind of story we want you to be able to say to yourself, to be able to recognize, I'm okay. I don't just believe it. I'm just not drinking or getting high on the hopium, right? Wearing the Kool-Aid or drinking the Kool-Aid or wearing the rose-colored glasses. I can see that this is what my account's doing. That might be what the market is doing, but I'm not doing what the market is doing. I'll do what I want. Hopefully when it turns around, I'll get as much of the upside, but I want to limit the downside. That's the secret sauce, if you will, to be able to make sure that you have better odds of not running out of money before you run out of time.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. Thanks, Patrick.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.